Welcome, all you wiretappers out there. I'm here in the studio of Gangland Wire. I have on a Zoom call David Bowman. David Bowman is familiar with our friend Frank Cullotta. As a matter of fact, David Bowman is one of the reasons that Frank Cullotta ended up in the witness protection program, because without people like David Bowman, he might have kept on banging it out there in Las Vegas. And he wrote a book called Bringing Down Cullotta, the story casino couldn't tell you. So welcome, David. I'm glad to have you on the podcast.
Thank you, Gary. I'm glad to be here.
So, you know, I've just been seeing you lighten up on Facebook and all the social media platforms here recently, but I hadn't heard your name before. You know, David, I did a whole show on the Hole in the Wall gang, but I missed a big part of it. And I was happy with myself that I was able to talk to Ernie DeVito back in New Jersey, who subsequently has died, by the way. I never did get a chance to get him on the podcast, but he was an interesting character. Repeat that.
Who was the guy you said that died?
Ernie DeVito.
Yeah, you spoke to Ernie, but did Ernie just pass away?
He just passed away sometime within the last couple of years. I'd say about a year ago.
I'll be damned. I didn't know that. Yeah, I talked to Frank a little bit about it, and I think he was still alive back in 2019.
Yeah, he would have been. Yeah, he and Frank, they didn't exactly see eye to eye. They had different opinions about who actually started the Hole in the Wall gang.
When you read my book, you'll definitely understand that, because I was Ernie was basically my contact, or the closest person I dealt with in the Hole in the Wall gang. And he was a pretty important person, since he was pretty much in on all the burglaries. He was the core of the Hole in the Wall gang, him and Leo.
Yeah, Leo Garino. Yeah, they were really good, solid professional criminals that worked together and kind of think as a team before this Hole in the Wall gang thing came along, from what Ernie told me.
Oh, absolutely. They and that's why I said Ernie was very good about giving us all the information. Myself and Jerry Costanza and Joe Tassoni, we kind of had a little subdivision of the Hole in the Wall gang, and because we didn't want to be. I mean, they asked me if I wanted to, about a week after I got into town, if I wanted to work with them. Jerry passed that on to me, that Ernie had asked him to ask me, and I said no. You know, I'm flattered, but you know, that's not really my bag. I said I'll, you know, work with him and give him some information, but I didn't want to be part of the crew or work with them.
Interesting. Now let's go back to a little bit about your childhood. Where'd you come from? I see that you're from Pueblo, Colorado originally, and you ended up in Las Vegas. Now, how'd you end up in Las Vegas, David?
Well, my father was basically forced into retirement. He worked at the Colorado Fuel and Iron, or CF&I, steel plant in Pueblo, Colorado. And he was just kind of, you know, after 32 years, and I had gotten really sick when I was in the 8th grade, and I almost died, and I kind of missed about a year's worth of school. So, but I was always very smart in school. I was, you know, top of my class. So I don't know, after I got sick, I kind of lost interest in school. I saw life in a different way. And it was just a combination of things. We decided to move out to Las Vegas, and that's how it started. I moved out there in '77. I drove out my own new '77 Olds Cutlass Supreme is what it was.
Wow, I had a '76 Olds Cutlass Supreme. Say that again.
What's that?
I had an old '76 Olds. I had a '76 Olds Cutlass Supreme.
I'll be damned. Yeah, well, that was '77 was last year they made them, you know, full size.
Yeah.
Because if you remember, then all the Japanese cars came in, and it was the fuel shortage.
Yes.
Everything was downsized. And, yeah, I drove out with my older brother Larry, and then my mom and dad drove out in their car, and this was October of 1977.
Now, David, you don't really strike me as the kind of guy that will like become involved with professional criminals. Tell me a little bit about your criminal history, because you weren't always working with the FBI.
No, I mean, when I went out there, I mean, that's really the thing. I was 16, 17 years old. I was born in 1961. So I went out there. I was an exceptional 16, 17, 18-year-old. And so once I got out there, my parents, my mother especially, it was kind of culture shock to them. And so they left. My dad left me out there with my older brother because, you know, he knew I was mature and could handle myself and wasn't dumb. And, you know, he wanted me to start working and everything. But once they left, I kind of got involved with some people in my apartment complex that we were living in. And I was living over on East Harmon Avenue, kind of by the university. And it looks completely different now. I think there's high rises and stuff there now. But when I got out there and I met these guys, we started selling cocaine. And by the time I met the Hole in the Wall gang and Frank Cullotta, I had already well established myself in Las Vegas as a pretty good big coke dealer. And so that's how I made my stripes in the street.
Interesting. So those guys, from talking to Ernie especially, and Frank too, but they used to like to find guys like you and rip you off. That was robbing
Right.
drug dealers was one of their things. So
Right.
how did you ended up ripping off Frank? Now, did they have their sights set on you?
No, me and my friend Joe Tassoni came into town back into Las Vegas in June, like the first week of June of 1980. And Gene Smith had just killed Frankie Bluestein. And a few months before that, in I believe March, Nicky Costanza Jr. was found in the trunk of his car, shot in the head, which was my friend and Jerry Costanza and Frank's wife, Elaine Costanza's younger brother. I mean, that was a big deal. And so was Gene Smith killing Frankie Bluestein.
Yeah. Hey, David, let me interrupt you just a minute. You know, for the folks that don't know, Gene Smith killing Frankie Bluestein, that was a big deal. If you saw the movie Casino, they reenacted that, where the cops are following a member of the Spilotro's crew, or they thought it was, and the guy got out and he had something shiny in his hand, and the copper shot him and killed him. And in the movie, they said it was a sandwich. Now, in real life, that Gene Smith was a member of the Metro intelligence unit, and they were following Costanza and several of the members of the Hole in the Wall gang, Cullotta and anybody else that showed up. And they saw this guy show up with Illinois tags, wanted to follow him away and see who he was. He thought they were trying to rob him. And he did have a gun, best I can tell. Kent Clifford told me that they traced that gun back to this guy's brother. Now, a lot of people argue with you about that, but he killed this Frankie Bluestein. So carry on with how you then ended up hooking up with Cullotta.
Yeah, and so we got in that night, and they pretty well put me and Joe, you know, not actually physically, but they kind of surrounded us and really hammered us and questioned us about both Nicky. I mean, nothing to do about Bluestein, but they were all really hot and talking about Gene Smith's murder. That's how they put it. He murdered Bluestein. You know, it was a hero sandwich, and you know, it was that whole story that they portrayed in Casino, which is not true. And I can get into that later. But so anyway, they wanted to know what we knew about who Nicky Jr. was associating with at the time, or if we knew anything. Nick and Jerry especially, I mean, I could see it in their eyes that they were, you know, if we gave the wrong answers, right, and took us out the desert. But
David, something happened you started pinging out.
Okay.
Start again. Just start with David and them question you about David Costanza being murdered.
Okay. Yeah, they really kind of cornered us that night and just were pumping us for information. They wanted to know what we knew about Nicky Jr. and who he was running with, and if we heard anything or knew anything. You know, they basically just wanted to find out who killed Nicky. Frank knew, but he was playing games at the time with Nick and Jerry and them. So, because they knew that would be a problem if he was to tell them. So, but anyway, it wasn't long after that. That was one intense night, though. That was one of the most intense situations I'd been in, because like I said, if I would have given the wrong answers or they didn't like the look in my eye, I would have gotten a beating or taken to the desert for the big ride. So, but that's how things began. That's how I got juiced in. As young as I was 19 years old in June of 1980. My friend Joe Tassoni was like mid-20s. Jerry Costanza was like mid-30s. So I was kind of the young guy that they were grooming. And like I said, I established myself on the street as, you know, a pretty good coke dealer. And back in those days, that was a big deal because everybody was doing cocaine. In fact, that's probably, if you want to get right down to it, was the root of why the whole thing crumbled out there.
Interesting. Now, you know, I got you here. I want to ask you a question about that cocaine business. How's a guy like you get a decent connection? I mean, you weren't connected directly to Colombians, I don't imagine, but how did you, I mean, were you like a user and then you're dealer and you start selling little bits? How do you get that connection?
Yeah, that's how it started. Like I said earlier, I met a couple of guys. Funny enough, one of them was named Larry Newman. It wasn't Lurch Larry Newman, and I talk about this in my book. He was from Columbus, Georgia, and his roommate was a guy from Waterville, Maine. So, and they were both, you know, college age guys. And that's kind of how everybody met in Las Vegas. You know, if you lived in an apartment or a condo, you know, you go down to the pool and everybody's hanging out in the jacuzzi and the swimming pool, laying in the sun. And you end up going over to somebody's place, and that's kind of how it began. They were, those guys had established a connection out there, and a pretty good one. And then my brother ended up leaving to go back to Colorado, probably, what was it, June of '78. And so from then on, Larry Newman moved in to my place, and then him and I kind of partnered up, and we and started business, and that's kind of how it began. And we did lose plugs or connections, but you know, when you're in that realm, it really is kind of an underground society, is really what it is. The drug world, you know, the meth, you got the meth people, you got the coke people, you got the pill people. It really is, and it's an underground community, and it's that's kind of how it works, and that's how you meet people. You know, big people, middle people, and through drugs a lot of the time.
So, David, you become an associate of Frank Cullotta and his Hole in the Wall gang, but somehow you end up becoming associated with the Metro Intelligence Unit, Kent Clifford, who led it. And by the way, folks, Kent Clifford is in my movie Gangland Wire. I was able to interview him. He was one interesting guy, as David will attest to. I never met Gene Smith, but those guys were they were gung ho. They were let's kick ass and take names with the mob out there. More so than usual with intelligence guys. You know, I worked the intelligence unit, and we mainly just followed people and took their picture and got on roofs and behind windows and watched them and tried to find informants that, like yourself, David, and we didn't really go out and follow people and stop them and end up in any gunplay. Nobody ever even came close. I came close once, but I thought they were going to shoot me and I was just going to get out of there. But anyhow, so how did you end up getting hooked up with them? Did they get a case on you or something?
No, they sure didn't. I came to them on my own, and that's one of the things I like to make very clear to people. When I was involved with the Hole in the Wall gang guys, I played straight up. I wasn't informing on them. I had no intention of informing on them. How it all happened was I had given, well, it was actually Ernie, the score. I participated in the score of a Cuban drug dealer that I tossed to them, that they went over and burglarized. What happened was Frank lied to me and Jerry about how much they got. It was a big lie because they got quite a bit. And we found that out through Ernie, Jerry. And so Jerry came over to my place and we were, freebasing coke, and he kind of got psyched up and was saying, "Hey, Dave, Frank thinks we're a couple of punks, I guess. He thinks he can, rip us off. And, he's like, it's your score. He says, I know where the shit's at. He says, we can go and, you want to go get it. Let's go get it." And I said, let's do it. And so we drove over to the house where the stuff was stashed. And I talk about this in my book. This was one of 3 big events that I was directly involved in that caused Frank Cullotta to flip and become a government witness. This was number 1, and this was a big deal amongst the family, as you could say at the time, because I was part of that inner sanctum. Believe it or not, I was. And so I cut my arm going in and bled all over the place. And that was the problem. If I hadn't cut my arm, everything would have went down differently after that. But because of that cut, they would have searched me. They would have wanted to look at me.
Yeah.
And there was no way to conceal that cut. So we had to come up with a bullshit story. And I'll detail all that in my book. If you read it, it's a pretty wild ride after that. But that's how I, anyway, months later, you asked me how I got involved with, Gene Smith. When I came forward in October of 1980, the police, the FBI, Metro Intelligence had nothing on Frank Cullotta and the Hole in the Wall gang. Like you were saying earlier, they drove around, took pictures of us sitting out front and our license plates on our cars and all that. And then they do background and everything. But bottom line was they had no cases, they had nothing. When I called up, I said, today's your lucky day, because I gave them the information that on the stolen furniture, which ended up sinking Frank. A lot of the publicity and a lot of the drama went to the Big Bertha's thing with Sal Romano. But that's how the FBI spun the whole thing when they burned me and kind of erased me from the record. That left a pretty big hole that they had to fill up with something. And so they filled it up with what they filled it up with.
Yeah, I remember reading that he had a bunch of stolen furniture in his apartment or something, and he caught in
a house that he just moved into on Algonquin.
Okay, and he caught a case for that, so that was pending during this time, and that's when they were planning the Hole in the Wall caper, the way I remembered. I may have my timing a little bit off there. Is that?
Yeah, I can give you the exact timelines. He got arrested in late November of 1980. That was the first blood that was drawn, and that was because of me. And I worked directly with Gene Smith. That's who I worked with. And again, he told me all about that was one of the first conversations we have. You'll read about it in my book, where I met him on Halloween night in his white Pontiac Bonneville. He picked me up by the Denny's, and we drove around, and it was a meeting that I'll never forget till the day I die, because it was a lot was said in that drive that we took, and that was the beginning of the end for Frank Cullotta and the Hole in the Wall gang and the Chicago outfit in Las Vegas. It really, truly was.
Yeah. For you guys, you listeners out there, see, I've been on that other side of that conversation, and it's, you're asking, as an officer, you're asking a man like David here to risk everything to help you out. And especially if you bend him and twist him and you got something on him, that's one thing. But when you don't have anything and you're trying to, you start liking him, I'll start liking you. And then I don't want to put you in a situation where you're going to get killed, but yet I want to make this case. I want to take down Frank Cullotta because he's been a thorn in my side for quite a while. And I know through him, I get to Tony Spilotro, who was, the ultimate goal here for those guys. So, it's like, that's a interesting conversation, because I've got to make you like me. I've got to try to figure out how to protect you. Then I start liking you as we start talking, and it's a little dance that you go through, and you end up forming a relationship, for want of a better term. And so that's an interesting conversation that you guys had, and I've been there. So and I applaud you for coming over.
Let me interject something here.
Start with let me interject something. Yeah, it started going out. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, let me interject something here about Gene Smith's time. When I met him on Halloween night for the first time, where we met each other, remember that he had killed Frankie Bluestein in June of 1980. They had put a hit out on him. Steve Bluestein, the dad of Frankie Bluestein, was a big guy in the Teamsters, and they put a green light out on Gene Smith. And I'm sure Clifford told you how he went back to Chicago,
yeah,
and knocked on the boss's doors and told them that if anything happens to my lieutenant, if you kill him, I'm going to come back here and kill 10 of yours. And that did happen. But when I met Gene Smith, I mean, that night, you want to talk about two guys that were very nervous, because my biggest concern and my biggest decision going forward to law enforcement was, should I go to the feds or should I go to the locals? Well, I didn't trust the feds. Okay. And if you read my book, you'll find out why in the end. But I also knew that Metro had been dirty with Joe Blasco. Okay. So, but there was one cop that I knew that they hated. And so he must have been straight. And that was Gene Smith, because he shot Bluestein. So that gave me comfort, because believe me, at that time in Las Vegas, if I would have came forward with the wrong person, that would have been fatal.
Oh yeah, I remember at that point in time, see, we were a member of what we call the Law Enforcement Intelligence Units. It's a national organization of intelligence units all across the United States, and Las Vegas had been kicked out because of dirty cops in their unit, and Joe Blasco was in that unit, and there was another sergeant out there that caught a case. Well, when Kent Clifford took over that unit, they got the new sheriff in, what was his name, McCarthy?
John McCarthy.
Got the new sheriff in, and he cleaned that out. And Kent Clifford has a heck of a story about cleaning it out. And said he walked into the unit and everybody's wearing these high dollar leather coats and jewelry, and half the units is at Christmas time and it's filled with cases of liquor. And he said, where'd this come from? They said, well, it came from the strip. We always get this. And he said, guys, remove that. And he said, I never want to see anything like that again. You're not to take anything from anybody. And then he started weeding them out, the Joe Blascos. and he cleaned that unit up just about that time. So you were right in the forming of the new, and they admitted them back into what we call LEIU, and they've been back in ever since. Now the sheriff's department I always thought was a little bit dicey out there. They had some people. Actually, this was just before Kent Clifford that they used to do background investigations for casino owners when it was actually just the sheriff's department before it was Metro, which was sheriff and local when they blended. And I met one of those guys. He came back to Kansas City and was doing some background. He was dicey, man. I can tell you, he was dicey as hell. I didn't know what the deal was. So, my next question, I think, is we're getting up here about 30 minutes. Do you remember when they put Sal Romano in with that crew? And Ernie DeVino told me a couple of stories. Ernie DeVino told me that Sal Romano, that Tony Spilotro wanted him in for some reason. I think he was an alarm guy and a pretty decent thief. Frank Cullotta claims that he was warned by some Chicago coppers that Romano was dirty. But Ernie tells me that Romano had an apartment that he said it just looked like it was a set. And it looked like that he had a girlfriend that they said was an airline attendant. So that's why she wasn't hardly ever around. Now, to me, that says the FBI set him up in an apartment that they wired up and gave him an lady FBI agent to act like she was a girlfriend and be around him. Did that happen like that, or am I reading too much into that?
Well, I can't honestly say. I can speak for what I did with Metro Intelligence, and they had an undercover apartment at Park Terrace, was the complex. I know because I was in that apartment, several times when we did the controlled drug buys on Costanza. That's where they would strip search me before the controlled buy. To do it properly and to wire me up, and that's where that was done. Then I would go out with Detective Cordell Pearson, was who I did the controlled drug buys on. But getting back to Romano, and you'll read about this in my book. I had done the major damage and given Metro big time intel on the hole in the wall gang and actually jobs that they had done that I participated in. But that's why Metro ended up bringing me to Dennis Arnoldy and Joe Gursky, Don Campbell, was to debrief me and take statements, and then they were going to use us initially to make cases on the hole in the wall gang. But what happened was in the process of doing that, they flipped Sal Romano. Okay. But we had already gotten the ball rolling. And like I said, Frank had already gotten nailed on the possession of stolen property, which I was 100% responsible for, which is what he ended up doing time over. And that's what got him convicted April 24th of 1982. And then I'll get into some of that later. But no, I didn't know Sal Romano. Other than what I've read about him, I didn't know him out on the street personally. But yeah, they probably did do that. I believe they flipped him sometime in the spring of 81, just a few months before the July 4th burglary. And I was doing my own thing with Metro. So let me say this. Even though they had formed the organized crime task force, they really didn't like each other. Okay. In fact, Gene Smith told me I don't trust them mother effers. Yeah. And I said, well, that makes me feel good now that you're going to bring me to them. I said, but thanks. I appreciate your honesty. We really formed a hell of a relationship, him and I did, over this year and a half that went on after they popped Cullotta.
Hey, David, I know the feeling. I had a gal once, And I said, we got to go. I got to take the U.S. attorney and an FBI agent about what we've been talking about. And I said, I'm going to tell you, I don't trust them. And they've told me that U.S. attorney said, now he's never going to front you out in any manner. And it wasn't 6 months from then, he gets hold of me, said, we got to have your gal down here at the grand jury. She's got to testify. I had to go tell her, I'm sorry, but he says, you got to testify. I know I promised you wouldn't, but you got to. And she was mad. So that happens a lot. Local guy gets something going, and then you get in with the U.S. attorney's office, and they just throw you to the wolves in a New York second. So I appreciate your situation there. So go ahead. I'm sorry I interrupted you on the.
No, yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. And like I said, we were like, as I like to tell people, he was like Bill Walsh and I was Joe Montana, because it was our championship season. We did what we set out to do, because when I first met him, I told him that I believed that Cullotta would roll, and he looked at me like I was like, kid, you got to be out of your mind. And
I would have to agree with him.
Yeah, he looked at me and I was kind of shocked. He looked at me and said, well, I don't know about that, kid. He says, these outfit guys are pretty hardcore. And I said, well, we'll see. And but I was right in the end, because after I got him on the furniture, and then he took the fall on Bertha's, and but the real kill shot was when I put the 5 controlled drug buys on Jerry, because he was married, got married to Elaine Costanza. And see, that's what most people don't understand about the family inside thing, and knowing the Costanzas as I did for years before I ever met Frank. I knew Elaine years before he did. So, and I knew the family influence on him would be big time if we was to put that kind of pressure on him. And that would be the third major deal that I was involved in that pretty well caused him to flip.
Interesting. So I have another question. I know a lot of people have. What about Tony Spilotro during that time? We're all interested in Tony Spilotro. He's kind of the big name here. At your level, was that name mentioned much, or what was your impression, or what was kind of the word on the street about this Tony Spilotro and the casinos, and all that?
Oh, I knew, during that summer that I was with those guys, one of the days that I'll never forget, that was very memorable, was July the 3rd of 1980. Okay, we had just gotten back with them, and by that time we were very comfortable with them, and they were very comfortable with us. In fact, my buddy Joe Tassoni took over for Jerry as the chef at the Upper Crust. So that's how close we were to him. I was at the restaurant every day with those guys. I wasn't plotting burglaries with them, because nobody was. You would take that stuff, there was a protocol that you went through. And if I had some information on, like I said, the Cuban drug dealer, I would go to Jerry, and then Jerry would go to Ernie, and then Ernie would go to Frank, and that's how things were done. And there was a pecking order and a protocol that had to be followed.
David, I don't know if you can hear me, but you just froze up after pecking order. Well, you're still frozen.
And but anyway, again, for example, the FBI shining.
David,
Okay.
David,
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you froze up after pecking order, so it's back now. So kind of start in there.
Yeah, like I said, there was a pecking order, but getting back to the night that I was going to talk about, it was July the 3rd of 1980, and that's when the Leo Guardino found the FBI surveillance camera that they had planted in the roof above the office of the upper crust.
Yeah, I
And
heard about that.
I was sitting 10 feet from Tony Spilotro that night. The place was crawling with feds. Oscar Goodman was there. Tony was there. Frank was there. I mean, it was, and that's why I was there, because it was like, hell, this was better than television. Are you kidding me? You know?
Yeah.
I mean, I was just doing the whole thing. I was eating dinner, and Tony was sitting 10 feet from me. And Oscar, and then I went home and turned on the television, and Oscar Goodman was on TV talking about how the police and FBI were using Gestapo tactics
Yeah.
to harass his Italian American business owner.
Yeah. I know the drill.
Yeah. But it was that's how it was back then. I mean, every day that year, 1980, and that summer especially, every day that I woke up, you never knew what the day was going to bring. And it was really something. It was like living in a movie every day. It truly was.
Oh, really? All right, David, I think we've probably pretty well done this. Folks, now you got to remember, get out there and get that book, Bringing Down Cullotta, the story Casino couldn't tell you. It's going to give you a lot of backstory, that questions you have had, I'm sure I always had, about what was going on out there outside of what Nicholas Pileggi wrote in his book and what they portrayed in that movie, because there was a lot more going on, as you can tell. And so it sounds like a good book. I have to admit, I haven't had a chance to read it yet. I've got it. I'm going to get it on Kindle. I think it's on my Kindle, if I remember right. When I first saw it come up, I thought, I want to read that one. Sounds really, really interesting.
Yeah, I just really would like people to check out my book and buy it. And if you like Casino, if you're into the Spilotro era in Vegas, if you're into FBI cover-ups and things like that, you're going to like my book. And you're going to know when you read it that it's the truth, because I think most people know truth when they hear it and read it. So I'm anxious to get reviews on it, and I'm really hoping to be the new face and voice of that era in Las Vegas now that Frank Cullotta has passed, because like I said, I was inside the police world and I was inside the hole in the wall gang world, so I know from both sides.
Yeah, you're kind of the last man standing. Like I told you already, Davino died. Frank's dead.
Right, and the reason is because I was so young.
Yeah.
While I was involved with them, which is a good thing now, so I can carry on the story and add to it as well.
Yeah, and Kent Clifford died. I think he had ALS or something. I'm not sure. And Gene Smith's never talked to anybody that I know of. I don't know if he's still alive or not.
Well, and there's one gentleman that I mentioned in the book who is still very much alive, and he's practicing law and is a very prominent personal injury attorney in Las Vegas. And I encourage all media people to contact Donald J. Campbell of Campbell and Williams Law Firm, because Mr. Campbell was the assistant U.S. attorney who I worked directly with, who presided over the grand jury that I testified on May the 5th of 1982, which I believe led to Cullotta flipping, because about a week later, that's exactly what he did. And I was flown out there, and you'll read in my book, the chapter Presidential Treatment. You'll read all about my testifying before this grand jury. But Don Campbell, just like Gene Smith, they kept their mouth shut, and because a lot of them know all about me, and they know the truth. And Campbell does. He knows what I did for them, and he knows what they did to me. And I really want to get a sit down with him or a response from him, because he knows who I am and what I did. So just wanted to throw that out there.
All right.
That is a very important thing regarding my book.
Yeah, well, there's media people from Las Vegas that listen to this podcast. I just talked to one of them the other day. So they will be alerted from this. Well, David, I really appreciate you being on the show. And people, get that book, give him a review, give him a good 5-star review. And that helps him sell books. And folks, the more books like this we sell, the more other people get to read them and get interested in them, because it amps it up in the Amazon algorithms. And so more people will see it and buy it. And he'll make some money, and you'll get more people interested in you, and more of this history will come out. So it's help him out, help us all out by giving us reviews and sharing your stuff on Facebook. If you're on the Las Vegas Mob History Facebook page or Gangland Wire podcast page, why you'll see us doing stuff and reposting things that David's posted, and David posts things, and help him get the message out, because it helps us all. Thanks a lot, David.
Thank you, Gary.
All
Have
right.
a great day.
You too. Bye.